Hey, good evening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that lovely music. Um, I just wanted to introduce myself briefly. My name is Zinnia Willits, and I am the Executive Director of the Southeastern Museums Conference. And a warm welcome to everyone joining us tonight for the AAMG SEMC Launchpad program, which we have titled Take the Candy, Networking in the Museum Field. So a warm welcome to all of you joining us tonight. For those who are not familiar with SEMC, we're a regional professional organization representing museums and museum staff in the 12 southeastern states, as well as the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. We have a membership of around 2,000 and continue to grow, so please join us. Today, we're thrilled to be part of the program and even more excited that it was developed in continued partnership with the Association of Academic Museums and Galleries. The SEMC AAMG collaboration on the Launchpad programs is a true example of the power of partnerships and peer-to-peer connection, learning, and camaraderie. I'm so thankful to Alexandra Chamberlain, AAMG's virtual administrator, and Christina DeRocher, AAMG's president, for oversight and collaboration on these sessions. Now I'm going to turn it over to Heather Nowak, who is SEMC's program administrator, to go over a few housekeeping notes and to introduce our panel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the Launchpad. My name is Heather Nowak, and as Zinnia mentioned, I'm the program administrator for the Southeastern Museums Conference. And before getting started, I'll quickly cover a few housekeeping items. If you need closed captioning, it is available. Simply click the CC button in your Zoom screen and enable the auto transcription feature. You can also download a full transcript of the program by clicking More at the bottom of your Zoom screen, choose Captions, and then View Full Transcript. The program today is being recorded and will be emailed to each of you. Since we are in a webinar format today, we do encourage you to utilize the chat to introduce yourself and share your thoughts or ideas. Please feel free to ask questions along the way in the Q&A feature, and we will do our very best to get through them by the end of the program. Also, don't miss our upcoming virtual programs. We will host Publishing Profits Museums on September 25th, where we will unpack both the rewards and challenges of producing books, catalogs, and magazines while sharing practical insights into the publishing process. You can check these out and more on our website under our virtual programs page. We do have a lot to dive into today, so let's go ahead and get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our panelists for tonight's conversation. Moderating is Christina DeRocher, President of AAMG and Visual Arts Director of the Fine Arts Center at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Also joining us is Zinnia Willits, who you've already heard from, our Executive Director at the Southeastern Museums Conference, and Ebony Belton, Lead Gallery Attendant at the Center for Civil Rights History and Research at the University of South Carolina. Many thanks to all of our panelists for sharing their perspectives on the power of networking. Christina, I'm delighted to turn it over to you.
Sorry about that. Thanks so much, Heather. It's great to be here. And thank you, all of you who are joining us tonight. I'm delighted to be able to present to you on this panel and to elicit ideas and strategies for connecting with peers through conferences and through associations like AAMG and SEMC. So again, thank you to Heather, to Zinnia, and to Ebony for having us here. So I'd like to get started just thinking about networking at conferences, thinking about what could somebody who's never attended a conference expect? And so Zinnia, I was wondering if maybe you could describe the SEMC conference, the size of it, where you hold it, the length of it, just kind of the ground rules or just the basics for somebody new to conference.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to, because I eat, sleep, and breathe conference, especially now that we're almost a month out from the Southeastern Museums Conference annual meeting. So this, as I said in my introduction, we are a regional Museum Association. So our conference is usually about somewhere between 500 and 700 attendees. I think you can expect museum professionals and those in related organizations from all over the Southeast. Our convening is 3 days. Usually starts on a Sunday afternoon and ends on a Wednesday. And within those 3 days, there are so many, and I realize it can be overwhelming, so many opportunities for networking. The basic structure of it is a combination of events and tours that you can sign up on so you can learn more about the host city, where you are, be grounded in their history and their arts and culture. But then also the foundation really of our conference are the professional sessions. So what I mean by that, if you haven't been to a conference before, people from all over our region submit session proposals to discuss projects that they've worked on or challenges that they're having in their museums and or successes. And sometimes it's just more of a peer-to-peer interaction. Let's discuss the future of the field and what's happening. So those sessions run throughout the day. You can look at the program, and one of the challenges I think of going to a conference is trying to figure out your time and which sessions you want to go to, who you want to meet. And I'm going to say that very specifically from the beginning. The conference programs usually have all of the speakers listed. They have all of the sessions. And so from the very beginning, even before you get there, or as you're considering, is this the conference for me? Look and see who's presenting. See if maybe there's somebody in a role that you're interested in, or somebody that you've always admired or seen on a virtual program that you might want to meet. So things to look out for in the program. However, it's a long day. For instance, an SEMC conference day begins with sessions around 9 a.m. There's usually 4 blocks of sessions during the day. Most of them are about 90 minutes. And then there's breaks in between and different ways to network and to meet with people, which we can go into more in depth. But that's not it. The sessions end around 5, and then there's a whole like evening part of it where usually for our conference, local museums host attendees, and it's a chance and opportunity for these organizations to really show off all the work that they're doing and to route hundreds of their peers through their museums. So the evening events, I would just say upfront, are as important to attend as the different professional development sessions as well, and some of the luncheons and things that we can get into more in depth later. But I'll stop there in a moment, but that's the basic structure. 3 days, full days, professional sessions, usually about 90 minutes, peer-to-peer learning, which I'm a huge proponent of. I will say it over and over again. Evening networking events, and then there's also usually a big array of luncheons and different groups that you can join if you would like to meet people and different ways to get involved. So that's our conference, but from what I've seen, at least from a regional level, that is the structure of most of them. State museum conferences are usually a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller, maybe in some ways a little bit easier to learn some of these networking skills with. And then you get into the really big national conference where you have thousands of people. I've been going to conferences for 20 years and I still find the national ones a little overwhelming at times. So I would be happy to talk later about how to get over some of that overwhelmingness, if that's a word.
Sure. You described a lot of different programs and sessions that you're running. And again, we're talking about networking. So just to reiterate, one of the things that you said was, as a tactic, to take a look at the presenters, think about who's presenting, who you might want to meet with. You can find their biographies online. You can look them up. It's a really good way to start identifying who you might want to meet with and be familiar with their line of work. Maybe they've published something. Maybe there's an online video of them giving a talk. So kind of be familiar with somebody if you're interested in meeting with them. But I want to go back even before conference and talk about a strategy that I've used. And then Ebony, I'd love to hear from you about some of the strategies you've used at conference. Could you talk, Zinnia, a little bit about your call for proposals and what you're looking for in a proposal? Because I want to get people thinking about another way to network is to create a call, to respond to a call by reaching out to people that you admire or somebody whose work you're aware of, but you don't really know. And you can think about the proposal process as a way to meet other people who are doing interesting things that you might want to know about. So maybe you could just describe what your proposal process is like so people feel a little bit more comfortable submitting to conference.
Yeah, I would absolutely do that. And then I would love to hear Ebony's input on this too, as someone who is submitting proposals, because it's interesting for me now being on the other side of it. But just a quick background, before I've been in this role with the Southeastern Museums Conference for 5 years. And prior to that, I spent almost 20 years as the director of collections and operations at the Gibbs Museum of Art in Charleston, South Carolina. So I most of my career movement, I would associate it very specifically with networking, particularly through conferences. And presenting was something that I did quite a bit. Now, for SEMC, if you're interested in speaking at a conference, there is usually there's a call for proposals. And behind that, there's a whole list of topics that our attendees from the previous year or even surveys that we do to our membership have identified as things that need to be talked about in this field. And right now, there's a lot of them. So it's our job on the other side to cull all of these um, ideas and then put them into some sort of a format so people are thinking, well, hey, I have experience with this at my museum. Or maybe this, I have a project that we just did that very much aligns. We had to raise funds and there were no funds. And how did we do that? So people have a lot of ideas and I think then they want to share them. One of the things that we are always looking for at our conference very specifically, and this could be very different than an academic conference, is a collaborative panel. So it's not just, it may be a single project, but we're trying to bring in as many voices as possible. Who were your partners on that project? Was it other museums? So that is a strong proposal for us. Sometimes you want to talk about your project in the context of other, how does that compare to other organizations? So I definitely have that experience of reaching out to colleagues who I did not know. I did one session many years ago about working with executive recruiters, and I wasn't even at a point in my career where any executive recruiters were calling me. So I kind of had no context on this. So I boldly reached out to several executive directors at art museums and different museums who I knew their names and was wondering if they had worked with them, and I created this panel. So I do think that there is a little bit of a stretch sometimes, but it's the benefits and the rewards to getting a little out of your comfort zone and inviting somebody to be part of a session that you have an idea about. So that was
Ebony, I'd love to hear your experience putting together a session and what went through your mind as you thought about panelists and how you may have used sort of pre-conference time to think about networking.
Mute button wasn't working. Okay, so pre-conference time to network, I think especially at SCMC, that Sunday is going to be a very ideal day to do some of that pre-networking even before our evening event. A lot of people come in on Saturday just for the fellowship about before everything really gets started, because once you get to that evening event, that's kind of, you're just basically running a race, a fun one, all the way until Wednesday. Now, as far as making a proposal for session, I have not done that for SCMC. I've done that for one other organization. However, I have seen the other side of it after the proposals are in, because I was a part of, or am a part of the program committee this year. So we go through a very extensive process of looking at every single proposal submitted, going through a grading system, You have a lot of advocacy happening within the room, and it's not from people often that even know these people. They're just looking at the work and what they put forth in these proposals because they're not, half done. There's a lot of thought that goes into them. Then even when it's time for us to um, officially choose these sessions, because all of them are very good. We've never had, at least in my experience, we didn't have anybody who didn't deserve a spot. We just didn't have enough, space for everyone. But there's always, other opportunities or things like, virtual sessions like we're having today. So I think seeing it from that perspective makes it very easy. I think too, as a council member, to see what our members want for proposals, to see what's going to be within these sessions, which I think also helps within the networking space because the way we have things categorized also allows for you to kind of have a better idea if you're really going through that networking and you want to take that very seriously during conference, you can and plan ahead for that as well.
Great.
And just quickly before we move on, Christina, I just want to brag on Ebony for a minute because um, I think, Ebony, you are an amazing example of networking and building connections through conference to move forward. I met Ebony through another one of our council members, and SEMC, that's our board of directors. That's what we call them, our council members. And Ebony kept showing up at things, and she was volunteering, and we'll talk about that later, and really began to establish who she was, what her career goals were, and how they aligned with the Southeastern Museums Conference. And Ebony is now on our board. So that's a pretty quick trajectory from um, entering the space to, but it was also through committee work and through these other things. So I know we'll dig into that. But I'm I'm honored to be on this program with you, and I'm glad that we can do it together because I think that both of us in our various ways throughout our careers have like seen it, like what these professional organizations and the network can do.
Good. Good. So at AAMG, because we're an academic institution supporting academic museums, we have different avenues for emerging professionals to engage in our programming, and one of them is through poster sessions. So we actively encourage emerging professionals or students who may not have a full-fledged program or project to present, but they may have a graduate work or a research project that they want to present. So we do offer poster sessions, and those are set up in our lobby. And that way, the students or the emerging professional gets opportunity to converse and explain their project and meet people. So that is just one of the ways that AAMG tries to promote and elevate networking amongst our young professionals. And I'd love to hear if either of, like, Zinnia, if you offer that, and Ebony, if you've ever done anything similar in your other areas of work.
I'll just jump in quickly that yes, the Southeastern Museums Conference, we do ours is called SWIM, Student Work in Museums. And so we have our call for student poster projects. And again, most of the projects have come out of work that's been done over a semester through a museum studies program or even through a history program or art history, whatever the college is. The proposals come out in April, but they stay open through the end of August because we're very aware of the academic calendar. So there's two different times to keep an eye out for these calls, at least from the Southeastern Museums Conference. And Christina, maybe you can talk too about when your conference is in AAMG, because SEMC is always in the fall. We're always in either very late September or somewhere in October. So you're going to want to look for a lot of these opportunities between April and August. And for us, for the swim program, those who are accepted into it, their registration is taken care of. And then, we usually are hopeful that museum studies departments will provide some funding for students to get to us. But we really are trying to build that program, and we model a lot on what an AAMG does and some of the other conferences. So we have opportunities not only for the students to be visible, and we usually stage their posters in our expo hall with all of the exhibitors. Again, a whole other topic that we can get into shortly, but we want them to be visible. And then at our conference, they have a separate session that museum professionals from all over the region can attend to hear from students. And I remember I talked to a class from, I think it was University of West Georgia, and this young man came up to me and said, "Well, why would museum professionals want to hear about what I'm doing?" And I said, "Well, we need to reframe that thinking 100%, because it's the student work and some of these you're on the cutting edge of things, especially as you're coming out of school, fresh ideas, fresh perspectives. And so student presentations at professional conferences are really important for us and for the students who
Yeah.
are getting the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ebony, did you present as a student?
I am not in school at the moment. I will be hopefully soon going back to get my master's in museum studies. However, I will say my first time seeing a post session was at SCMC, my first SCMC in 2022, I believe. What was that? That was Arkansas?
Arkansas, yeah.
Yep. That was the first one. That was a very good one. Very interesting. Everything closed at 9 o'clock. Anyways, but I think one thing I could speak on too from SCNC is I didn't get the benefit of being a part of swim. However, I did get the benefit of receiving one of the student scholarships, so that did allow me to get to conference on my first go around, and really just kind of see what SCNC had to offer. And then in my other role, of course, with the Center for Civil Rights, we don't have that necessarily, but we just did our first conference last October, and we did have a poster session of our own personal students from our graduate students as well as our undergraduates. So kind of doing that same thing, because of course with the University of South Carolina, they have a larger day where they do that for all the students called Discovery Day. So very similar to what I was seeing at SEMC. So just seeing how even if you're a student where you don't see that at your university, you can kind of see what the professional world is looking for you to do, even before you enter into that field specifically.
Great, great. I'm going to just shift a little bit to talk about some of the informal and more formal networking opportunities. Zinnia, when we began, you listed a whole range of programs, evening events, offsite events. And then Ebony, maybe we could start with you, since your role has changed from volunteer and attendee and now council member. Maybe you could just sort of frame, like, how do you view networking now as a council member, and what do you do as an ambassador when you're at the conference?
So actually, I've just added roles. So I will also be volunteering this year, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. I think as a council member, I think the biggest thing out of our outside of our 3Ds, I guess I might as well say that I feel like a mom might be in the room, but he always tells us as council members, you have to be a doer, a donor, or a door opener. So I feel like number one with conference, people need to see you, because of course people are voting on who's on council, but you want to know the people who are making the decisions on behalf of you in this organization. I think continuing to volunteer as a council member is also a big plus, just because people see that, I don't know what it is, but there's like this very weird thing about board members. I know some other board members can be that way, not on our board. However, but they seem that they're just not touchable, that you can't really have a real conversation with them. And to just see that I'm at the registration working and I'm a council member just makes you feel like a regular person, which we all are regular people, but just so those, you don't have those narratives that are brought into the space, especially when you're in college, you just have all these thoughts about what you think people are doing or how people got there, and not even realizing that they came from basically where you were at one point. So I think this will really be the first year. I mean, I got elected right in October last year, so this will be my first year actually just full-fledged going out. But I think it'll be a whole lot easier for me because, like I said, my first conference was 2022. We're in 2025 now. People already know me. So it's more of just trying to expand previous conversations, bringing new people to the table. And I'm always, of course, looking out for those who are under me, because I do want, our council to continue to be diverse and young. People aren't all old, but just making sure that everybody has that, demographic and just that reach to age groups. So we can all build professionally through networking and all the other opportunities that SCMC offers.
Great. Great, thank you for that. And Zinnia, why don't you describe some of, go in a little bit more detail about some of the sessions. I'm thinking sometimes a panel discussion isn't the easiest way to network versus maybe a workshop or a roundtable. Maybe you can get into some of those sessions and strategies for people who are in those programs to network with colleagues.
Absolutely. First, and I just want to say, as the executive director, how wonderful it is to hear a council member say, Ebony, that you're going to be out there doing those continuing the networking, because the being an ambassador for what we do as an organization is really important. And I am so thankful for that visibility of our council members and for that being approachable. And I don't know how to, I don't know who's on this call, how many students or emerging museum professionals we have, but I just want to say we are all approachable. We're just people who kind of came up through the ranks and had to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and feel sometimes uncomfortable. But one of the things I always say about the Southeastern Museums Conference, and I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it and if I hadn't seen it. If you see a circle of people talking, if you stand on the edge of that circle, it will open. And people will say, "Oh, who are you? Tell us about yourself." So and I know that that's hard to, look at all these people who are in the field and maybe doing roles that you want to do, but they want to talk to you as well and find out what your career goals are and what they can learn from you. So I just want to say, don't be afraid to do that. And if occasionally someone may be busy and running by, but that doesn't mean it's over. You just have to sort of meet the moment for that. A couple of things with SEMC that I think are really helpful if you're new. And I just want to share this experience because I've been, I've been going to conferences for 20 years, and each one I go to, I know people, and or I'm going with a group of people, or I already know I'm going to have dinner here and there. Well, a couple of years ago, I had an experience just in my role. It's good for me to go to other people's conferences so that I can see how they're structured and what we're doing. But I hadn't had to do a real sort of like hardcore networking in a while where I didn't know people. And this was a conference I had never been to. So I was a first timer. And I wasn't exactly sure of the structure and the flow and what was expected and what the vibe was. And I forgot what that felt like. So I just want to say, I know it can be disconcerting sometimes to attend an event you've never been to, or to, especially if it's out of town and you've got to deal with hotels and travel and all of that. And so that experience for me was really impactful in terms of how to try and make people feel comfortable and immediately give them a structure once they are coming to SEMC. So that's things that we're constantly working on. Even from the fact last year when we were in Baton Rouge, I asked our council members, I'm like, hey, can you guys stand in the lobby when people are arriving to check into the hotel to just welcome them? They're getting off the road, they're coming from. So that I guess when I'm from an attendee standpoint, or for someone who's looking to make connections, when you see someone at a conference, and most conferences, they have ribbons on their badges or something that identifies them either as a staff member or a board member, or somebody. Those are people you want to know. And so it's helpful to just, in that casual situation, arriving, make that connection. Hey, I just got off the road. My flight was a mess, or I'm great. I'm so excited. But I think that's one thing you can do is kind of look at the ribbons. I never thought about talking about this, but like the ribbons are kind of important. They identify people as various leadership roles. I know at SEMC, we do something called a first timers welcome. It's the first day of the conference, not that pre-conference Sunday, but the Monday. We used to do it in the later in the day. This year we're switching it to the morning. if you see those, whatever conference you go to, if it's a state, if it's a regional, if it's a, and you've never been there before, go to those because then you're all of a sudden going to plug yourself into a room of other people who have never been there before and are like, what is going on? So you have your own network. And we also kind of force you to make friends in those in those networking events. But it's fun. I always do it. I want, even though I'm as a, you know, par conference administrator, I'm kind of running around. I'm making a point to be visible, hopefully, and approachable. So first timers events are really important. Just have a look out for those. Um, the luncheons, I would say, are another way. Like, let's say you're new, you're a museum educator, you've been in your job for a year or so, and you see, or even if you're a student and that's a role you want to go into, a luncheon, any sort of a food event is gonna be a more casual space to just sit down or next to somebody and ask them what they do, have a conversation. So I'll stop there for the moment because again, I was like, I haven't really prepared for this session. And then I realized like I could talk about it for 5 hours because and I think, Ebony and I both really um, are proof of this. Networking and making the connections, it not only widens your professional circle, but also creates friendships and partnerships for the future. And it's just something that it's constantly we're constantly working on it, whatever stage of career you are at.
I don't know why my mute's not working. Okay. Um, So actually, to piggyback off of what Zinnia just said, we have something very unique to just SCMC, and that
Mm.
happens that Sunday after the evening event, and that's called Table Talk. That is a very great time to network freely to everyone. I would say, well, I guess explaining what is Table Talk. So Table Talk has been going on for maybe what 2 years, 3 years now. This will be the third year, I believe. And it was started by former council member Lance Wheeler and council members Bridget Jones and Ahmad Ward. And it's going to be different structure this year. However, it's that time and place. So not in the way that Zinni was saying, of course, like council members being in the lobby, talking about that flight. We're talking about the real issues we're having at work. However, it might be in a more comical way. Like we said, one year that registrars didn't matter. Obviously, they matter to a museum space. But just to kind of just get people going and having conversation and reeling that into the realities of what's actually happening at conference within our own lives and talking about that. And you'll be amazed at the people that literally just become I wouldn't say necessarily friends. Of course, you'll make friends as you go through SCMC and learn about our network and you start to be participatory. But I think that's probably the most, I guess, kickback way to have a networking experience or start your networking experience and not have to feel so pressured. And of course, be dressed up in your business casual, trying to talk to a council member when, we're all just kind of just relaxed from the evening and just enjoying ourselves, but still understanding why we're here, what we're doing, but also having a fun time explaining what we just deal with on a day-to-day basis sometimes at work within this world and what we're dealing with in this time period.
I agree, Ebony, and um, I think we lost Christina for a minute, so let's you and I just keep talking because as we go into this, I have a few questions for you about your strategies. I mean, yes, it's conference, and we're talking a lot about conference, but this could also just be within your community, and meeting people. One, just to reemphasize what you were talking about, the evening events at a conference, or even an evening event at in your community, within your college, an exhibition opening, or a lecture. Those are all really good places to go and yes, there's presenters, and I have some tips about how to get in front of those presenters after they present. But I think that prioritizing every now and then going to something, like I said, if it's a lecture or an evening event at conference, and making it a point to try and meet somebody new or find somebody that you really would like to interact with. But now, I mean, I'm going to ask you. So, if you were at conference or at US University of South Carolina or whatever, and you were at an event and there was somebody that you really wanted to meet, maybe somebody in a position you were looking to get, and you met them, what is your strategy there? Like, are you prepared? What are you doing?
Ugh. Okay, let's go the prepared way first.
Okay.
So first, being prepared, I would say, of course, come early, get a seat close to the front. You don't have to be directly in the front, so you're already in that person's line of vision before even saying who you are and what you're doing. Um, it's okay to be a little bit of a lingerer, at least towards the end of, well, not towards the end, but once they've ended, make sure they end what they're doing before you go up to them, please. But make sure that you kind of stand there, wait in that line for a little bit. While you're waiting in that line, talk to other people in the line, see what they're doing, because it might be a while you're waiting. But I think we just have that just irrational fear in the back of our head, oh, this person's not going to pay me attention, they're not going to talk to me, and it's just that will overtake you before you even try to have that chance. So I think the first thing, so just like even in school, you sit at the front so you can pay attention, the teacher's looking at you, they're paying attention to you. It's kind of the same concept. Now, I would say unprepared, because sometimes there's an unprepared strategy because you just might have heard about something last minute and now you want to go, and you might have gotten there late. um First of all, always email somebody. Always email or send a LinkedIn message if you see they're active on their LinkedIn. I know everybody's not necessarily on there actively, but just try to ease your way in. Like as somebody told me before, be annoying. um it sounds kind of weird at first, but they have to pay you attention at some point. And it's also within a networking opportunity, especially if you're trying to find a job. The worst they can say is no. So it's just a matter of putting yourself out there. So I think obviously if you become more practiced and prepared, you taking that first initial step just to put yourself spatial wise close to them, that allows for a little bit closer proximity just to really get and dive deeper into what you want to do. And even though I haven't done that per se with the jobs I've had so far in that way, I've definitely done that just going in my 3-4 year journey of being a part of SEMC.
Yeah, I had written down a few notes about that earlier because it's interesting just where I am in my career. I do have people that come up to me because they're just curious, how did you get there? And so we had this brief conversation, and you mentioned a few things that I think are really important. One is sitting up close. It is because what's going to happen is the session is going to end, and people are going to kind of rush to the front of the room to ask questions, and everybody has their story and they want to get in front of these people. So if you're already right there in their radar, if you just stand up, and it can be as simple as, I just wanted to introduce myself. I appreciate what you do. I would love to connect with you in the future. And then I'll be curious. I have a follow-up question about the best way to connect. But, I'm squarely Gen X. So like if you hand me a business card, that's fine. Now there's also, the apps or whatever to trade information. But however you do it, the important part of that is following up. Because and I've heard this from some of my own students. They're like, well, I don't want to bother anybody. Don't think of it as a bother ever. People who have been in this field for 20 years, having someone come up to them and say, I admire what you're doing, or I've always wanted to meet you, it is so like, it's flattering, and it's gratifying because, a lot of us have been doing this work for a long time. And so to have somebody see us, and I guess I'm saying it to frame it, as much as we're appreciate somebody seeing the things that we do, especially from an emerging museum professional, that way. So, so that's just my 2 cents on that. And then know what you're gonna say or what you want to ask, though. And that can be awkward, and I get it that sometimes it happens like very organically, but even it's just like, I just wanted to introduce myself and thank you for what you just presented about. That can be enough. But Ebony, I'm curious, how do you trade information with people when you're networking?
So I was born in 1997, so I'm at the very top of Gen Z. So we like digital things. I do like, still paperback and things. However, for conference, I hate business cards, but also just
I,
coming out of school, I don't have money to just be printing out all these business cards and it's just not coming in like that. So we have all these wonderful apps on our phone. As a matter of fact, I don't know if it's gonna be able to show with the blur. There's an app called Blink, Blinq. It's on, I'm assuming, Apple and Android devices. And you can't see it. I got my blur on. Okay, for all intents and purposes, okay, there's my face. Cool. So it has your QR code, and attached to your QR code is whatever you want to put. So your name, of course, what your role is at your job. I have hyperlinks for SCMC, the center at the University of South Carolina Center for Civil Rights History and Research. Just all the things that you want people to know about you. It's basically like your LinkedIn on your phone, but not on the LinkedIn app. So you can put your phone number in there if you want in there, your email, and you literally just scan it. Scan the QR code, you save it to your phone, and then it doesn't save the contacts to your actual phone, it saves it to the app. So you have to go in there to change it from there, but I think it's very easy. It even has a feature in there where you can put how you met this person. So I'll put like SCMC 2025. So when I go back to reach out to that person, because sometimes, you go to a lot of things or you just, around a lot of people. So you're not going to remember everybody necessarily, the first time you see them again after a conference and it's been like 3 or 4 months. But I can go back on my phone and go, okay, this is such and such from this institution. And I can kind of go back in my head the things that we talked about when we first got together. So that's really been a big help for me. And it's free. It's absolutely free. I actually need to update mine. I don't think mine has my council things on it quite yet. So I'll do that before a conference. But Blink, Blinq, is a really good app that is a virtual business card and LinkedIn sort of.
That sounds really great. And I just want to share a technique. And I'm so sorry that I had to drop off for a second. I was having some technical issues. But one of my colleagues who just started at the University of Massachusetts moved up from the DC area. And for her to get established, she put out to her network online that she was going to be in Amherst and who are some people that she should meet. Just kind of put it there like, who in this area, I'm new. Do you have any recommendations? Could you introduce me virtually? So she kind of laid that groundwork digitally. And I think the same is true for a conference. I know that before I go to a conference, I kind of look through my contacts to see if there's anybody that I know that's in the area and if they're going to be there. And I just reach out to them and say, hey, are you planning on attending? Be great to see you. And if you're not, maybe we can find time. So certainly drawing on your digital contacts as well as just thinking about the program and the presenters are other great ways to think about networking.
Just one follow up on that. First of all, Ebony, I now have that on my phone. And I still have business cards. I have that, and I think probably one of the points of that too is to know how to communicate across generations. And sometimes even if there are no business cards, like I'll just take a picture of someone's badge if I need to remember their name, and follow up with them later, and I'll do the work. And so it's nice to have multiple ways to communicate like that. But I do appreciate the stuff on my phone now. I was slow to come around, but I've gotten there. And then I just want to make one point too about LinkedIn. I know not everybody wants another app or another thing or another profile to keep up with, but LinkedIn is really important for networking. I mean, I think I'm not like generalizing for the whole world, but I know that a lot of times when people meet you professionally, one of the first things they do is to go to your LinkedIn account to see if you're there, what you're presenting about yourself professionally. Maybe even it's a kind of condensed version of your resume. So And I realized this sort of I remember I went to an American Alliance of Museums conference. I mean, this was probably 10 years ago, and I had done almost nothing on LinkedIn. I mean, I had a picture that was like super old. I was never on there. And I met all these people at the conference, and as I was going home, all these, my phone kept blowing up, and all these people were connecting with me on LinkedIn, and I'm like, oh my God, they're like looking at this stuff that's like so outdated. And so I do think it's important to have an up-to-date profile, and then also, um, every now and then spend some time just scrolling through your feed and having a LinkedIn presence, I guess, even if you're just liking what other people are doing or occasionally making a comment or throwing out a congratulations, like that is networking. It's passive networking, but it is a way to get your name out there. And some be like, "Oh, who's Ebony who liked my, post about whatever I was doing?" And you never know what path that's going to lead down. So that's my $1,000 advice there.
We have about 15 minutes left. And before we go to any kind of Q&A or read through things that people have listed, I do want to talk about an important part of our field that is often overlooked, but is really critical to our success as professionals. And those are the vendors and the sponsors who support our conferences. And so I'd love to hear from you both about how you expand your network when you're dealing with vendors and when you're dealing with sponsors at your conference and in other areas of your work. Ebony, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think with sponsors and vendors, that is a different networking experience, but I think is just as equally as important because with that, when you think about sponsors and vendors, they go to everybody's conference. They're going more than to just your conference. So I know for a lot. So as a matter of fact, just not to plug them, but this is actually a solid light can. This is a solid light. I'm tired, guys. What's the cup? Yes. So with them, they're at the conference that I'm at usually. They're at the conference for SCMC, AAAM, just all across the region, and even doing other things. Hold on, we got the. My bad, y'all. So I think with networking with them, it's very important because you always get to have, I feel like more FaceTime with them than you would with somebody that you would see at SCMC. You only see them once a year. And even just going up to people, because I know for me, especially SCMC, I just go up to the most random vendor, somebody that I know I have no reason with what I do with my job to work with them, but just to get the word out. Because for all I know, it could be 10 years down the road, I might need to call you and ask about your services, and maybe that's helpful for me. So I think thinking about them as just as important in networking as you would just individuals at conference, just because you're most likely to see them again within that same year, or at least within the 12-month span if you're constantly attending conferences. And that goes as well for academic conferences too, because they tend to, of course, overlap with vendors and sponsors. And I think that's a really good way of networking, just from a different way of looking at that dynamic.
Yeah, I would say that, at this point, oftentimes people in my network are looking for references, they're looking for information, maybe they're working on a project. And if you can broaden your network to include your vendors and your sponsors, there are fabulous people to reach out to and say, I don't have that information, but who I know somebody who does, and you can refer them. And again, it's really important to think of our vendors and sponsors as thought partners in our field. And so expanding out beyond just people who are working directly for museums or historic sites, it's just really critical, just because you have that many more experts, colleagues to draw upon and to make connections for other people. So Zinnia, maybe you could talk about some of the ways that you include vendors and sponsors in your program. This year for AAMG, one of the things that we did was we hosted a meetup between our vendors and sponsors and our board members. So they
Ooh.
wanted some of that. Yeah, it was really nice. They really liked that. It was like it's like we held it the sun like the day before, sort of a pre-conference. And it was just a way for our vendors and sponsors to meet our board members. Oftentimes our board members don't make it around to all of our sponsors, and they really appreciated that opportunity.
Yeah, and again, I'm always looking for ways to get attendees. And one of the early on, someone told me, well, we're really industry partners. Like if you call us vendors, it's like we're set apart. So I have that stuck in my mind, and the way that we view it at SEMC, and I know at AAMG, these are also our members. These are corporate members. These are museum service providers. And here's the thing, many of them have worked in museums or have that type of experience. We did a program maybe last year about kind of museum adjacent jobs. And these are people that are you really wanted to talk to. For instance, at our conference, there's a lot of exhibition design companies that are there. And within those companies, they have project managers, they have people who are fabricators, they have design. There are collections shipping, like art shipping companies that come. And maybe you really want to work with collections and you want to be more on the hands-on movement of them around the country. Getting a job with an art shipper, it's adjacent, and it could be if nothing's currently available exactly with what you want to do, getting some experience within these adjacent industries is a really good career step, I think. So you want to talk to the companies in the expo hall, not only about what services they can provide your museum if you're in one, but maybe like ask those people how they got those jobs. Like, what is their background? Where did they come from? What interested them in museum fine art insurance? I mean, maybe there's like this sort of tangential thing. Then that's, the reason we called this program Take the Candy. Because if you are at a museum conference, a lot of the exhibitors, they have giveaways, like Ebony was showing you the water bottle, and most of them usually have dishes of chocolate. And some people are always like, oh, I feel bad taking the candy if like we're not going to purchase their services. That's not why they're there. I mean, yes, they'd like to make a sale and, get a new client out of it, but we are learning from their industry and they are learning what museums need. And it's also, again, this whole tangential career and different ways to go. So I really encourage everybody to, and they came to the conference to talk to people. So don't ever feel bad. And then sometimes if you just go up and take the candy and be like, I'll come back, they get it. It's okay. It's but I really do think there's a lot to learn both ways from the industry partner expo hall and the attendees. I don't even remember what you actually asked me.
That's great.
Something
Thank
like
you
that.
so much. Um, we put it out there. If anybody has any questions, if you wanted to put them in the Q&A, Heather and Alex can take a look at them. I can't see them, so they'll pass them along to us through the chat. And if anyone has any parting thoughts, we're welcome to that as well.
Here I can see the questions.
Yeah,
So
there's a question for you. Oh, wait, there's one for
Ebony.
Ebony. It's in the
Yeah.
chat, Ebony. I'll read it to you. It says, can you share more about your ability to be bold, jump right into networking after the first engagement and sustain those relationships?
I don't know if I would call it bold. I guess it's just me thinking about it. But I think don't be afraid to be pulled in by somebody. If that makes sense. Because a lot of times, if you, even if it's not somebody you know personally, even if it's just on a professional level, if you see somebody that is within the field, at least further than what you are, and they're trying to reach back, don't just go, oh, well, no, I'm not ready, or, it's not my time yet, because that's how I got to where I am with SCMC, because former council member Lance, Big Brother Lance at this point, and he was like, hey, I think you would be really good here. You should meet these people. But of course, he left me alone to, network and do the things on my own. But it was really just, you just have to do it. I think it's just a matter of like, even like when you literally went to the first day of school, you were scared. You weren't there with your mom and dad. Like, you just have to do it, and the more you do it, the easier it is. Because of course, when I first got to SCMC, I wasn't talking how I'm talking right now. Like, I said hey to Zinnia, and I talked and I said things, but I was just kind of like, hey, oh, this is nice. I like SCMC. But then as you get there and as the days go on, you make friends, you make connections, and then you just get more comfortable because also with a lot of these conferences, you share a lot of interests with these people. So that's already going to something familiar, even if it's with strangers per se. So I think if you think about it in the way of everybody's not going to know everybody, even as a council member, I don't know everybody. I know a lot of familiar faces, but people always come that are new, and you just have to continue that practice. I think so. To answer that question fully, I feel like you just can't stop. Like when you start networking, you have to continue to do it, even if it's just, hey, here's my name, here's where I work, love to connect with you. That's starting somewhere. So just continuing to do it because now it's just very easy, and it doesn't hurt to have a conversation with somebody.
Great.
I have another question. Thanks for that, Ebony. I have a question from one of our Launchpad alumni. I think we can call Lance Wheeler an alumni of this program. It's good to hear from you, Lance. His question for you, Zinnia, is could you please explain how SEMC empowers individuals to network, particularly emerging museum professionals, for example, by building relationships with Spelman and other universities?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that we are actively working on in terms of bringing SEMC to some of these museum programs so that they have a better understanding about who we are. The Southeastern Museums Conference, our headquarters, I guess you could call it, is based in Atlanta. And so our staff has really made an effort to engage with universities around the Atlanta area. And we now have an established internship program with the Atlanta University Collective, which is Spelman and Morehouse and Clark Atlanta University. So we are actively engaging in their paid internships with the Southeastern Museums Conference each summer. Those interns then, bring back what they're learning to their peers. We go out and we talk to the university classes just about what the Southeastern Museums Conference is. At the actual conference, there are separate meetups for students. We always have an emerging museum professionals meetup. It's usually kind of in between conference sessions and then receptions, and it's open to anybody. I mean, if you're my age and all of a sudden you've entered the museum field, you're an emerging museum professional. So it really, I feel like our networking events are very inclusive, but we are also making specific, purposeful invitations to different programs and museum studies programs and universities to come join us, reaching out. And on our side, waiting for people to come to you and just learn. It's a different type of networking. For us, it's networking with other organizations, with other universities, and building those bridges when maybe they're not obviously there. And so that means reaching out, making an invitation. Please come join us. I want to tell you more about what we do. And so SEMC, I mean, we're always a work in progress, but I think that we've made some great strides there. I had one other thing to say before Heather cuts us off, and it was about something about, I don't know. It'll come to me.
Well, I have one thing that I would like to add. I know we were talking about regional conferences and national conferences, but we always go back to join your state conference as well. If you're really wanting to get into the game and into the field, join your state organization, and they all have these small regional gatherings within their states as well. So it's not this big event, it's a small event, and it allows you to just kind of learn the ways of networking. So I would encourage you all to join your state association. And then within our regional, and I know AAMG does this as well, they do small event gatherings also around the area. So join those and do small member meetups. That's a good way to get started also. So
Great
did we
idea.
have,
Wait, just one thing because I
did
want
you
everyone
remember? Yeah.
to talk about this. No, just about volunteering and especially volunteering at conference registration because like you see and hear a lot
Yes.
than just what you're because I feel like that's a really smart way to network.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. You do meet
Volunteering.
everyone at check-in.
Yes.
Yes, for sure. I think volunteering. So, I think the least important thing about volunteering is that that is the cheapest way to get to conference. It is a great way to get to conference. However, well, when I was an undergrad, I was a part of Alpha Phi Omega. I still am, the largest service fraternity. So I've always had a service heart. So for me, once I left school, it was very much just trying to figure out how can I volunteer with my busy schedule, and then just having SCMC had the opportunity to volunteer. I'm also very nosy. So it also lets you see how things work. Because for me, I don't like to join things and just go, hey, what's going on? And just exist. I'm like, no, how did we get this person to, sponsor this bag? How did we, what triggers are going to be in the bag? How many things are we going to have? Because I was coming back with a whole bunch of stuff in my carry-on. And it's just like, even just registration, like I think for me, for example, for last year, I actually met somebody that was at USC. USC is a very big campus, so you don't know everybody within the space. And we volunteered together during the same session time. And she actually won a tour of mine on campus, just impromptu, because she remembered me from that connection that we made during our volunteering time. So I think that was also a way of just networking without even really trying to network. And that's somebody I still see now when I go to the Caroliniana Library on campus. So I think volunteering too is just, it's a good way to get into the organization, understand the workings of the organization. Cause I feel like that was the first step for me. Like, okay, I want to know how conference run. Now I kind of want to know how the actual organization runs. How does that happen? What's the budget look like and all these things? And then all of a sudden you're getting a call saying, hey, there's something, council member, you're thinking about that, you think it's something you want to do, and then you're 3 years in the game and you're here. So it's really just the small things really can become big things. And I feel like had I not taken that opportunity, because I volunteered every year since then, and I think I'll just do that until the end of time, because I just like that experience of being at registration. It can be hectic at times, because people can be very stressed and just trying to figure out if they have everything squared away. But that's usually most people's introduction to conference. So also being a council member, you want to make sure that people are having an enjoyable experience in that first time. They're not, somebody looking crazy or anything like that. So also just volunteering just has a much bigger output than I think a lot of people think about. So it's still one of my favorite things that I do with SCMC. Even as a council member, you can do all of it if you want to.
And that's how you got on program committee as well. I was like, Ebony, have you ever thought about being on the program committee? So it leads to a lot of
Exactly.
Yeah,
things.
you hear everything. You sit
Yeah.
there and
And
you
I
really
love it. I love it. I do, because I like to understand how things work, because it makes you appreciate your organization even more than what you did initially. And that's how I feel about SCMC.
I like that. Small things become big things. That's
Yeah.
that's my takeaway from it.
Yeah.
Well, I
Well,
don't
this has
see
been
any other
fantastic.
questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
does anyone have any questions?
Well, we do want to be respectful of everybody's time. We're 4 minutes past the hour. So if we don't have any other questions, we will send you a recording of this video. And if you have, any questions along the way, we'll share everybody's contact information. And we hope that you're inspired to go out and do some networking now. So thank you all for joining us today and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
That was great, you guys.